Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Friday, June 27th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Are we heading toward a future with less and less snow?
The first thing is to kind of understand is, has there been a trend in changing or declining snowpack over time? And the answer to that is yes, the snowpack across pretty much all of the Western U.S. has been declining since the early 1900s.
So what exactly is behind this, and what can we learn from the data? That conversation coming up. But first, today's headlines. Details are emerging on a rock climber who recently died in Yosemite National Park. The Mariposa Gazette reports that a climber who plunged to his death earlier this month was an 18-year-old park employee from Texas named Grant Klein. Park officials did not identify the climber or reveal any circumstances around his death, but did confirm to the Gazette that a death occurred. Park officials also did not respond to KVPR in time for this broadcast. As of Thursday afternoon, a GoFundMe page for Klein's family had raised $18,000. West Nile virus has been detected in mosquitoes in Fresno County. The disease is carried by the insects and in the majority of cases causes only mild symptoms. In rare cases, it can lead to neurological complications and even death. One man died in Tulare County this month after being infected with the virus. 3 dead birds in that same county also tested positive. The virus has been detected in 13 counties so far this year. A new dashboard is shining a light on a lingering health conundrum that Latino neighborhoods are disproportionately afflicted with extreme heat and air pollution. As KVPR's Carrie Klein reports, those trends have inspired local action.
The dashboard is published by UCLA's Latino Policy and Politics Institute. It shows that statewide, predominantly Latino neighborhoods are exposed to 60% more extremely hot days than white neighborhoods. Latino neighborhoods also report roughly twice as many asthma-related ER visits. The disparities are even more pronounced in the San Joaquin Valley. These are urgent public health issues, says Mona Nyandoro-Cummings of the nonprofit Tree Fresno.
I think that's extremely important to understand. It's also, connected to our access to health care.
That's why her organization focuses on expanding tree canopy, which can bring a host of benefits, including
better air quality, better water quality, and cooler areas where people can spend more time outside.
Among other projects, Tree Fresno received more than $1 million to plant thousands of trees in South Central Fresno. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
A former high school teacher in Fresno is facing federal charges related to child exploitation. The charges were announced yesterday against 37-year-old Ray Anthony Waller. He used to teach at Bullard High School. The U.S. Attorney's Office alleges that Waller exchanged sexually explicit material with a minor. He was arrested this past February after facing related charges from the Fresno County District Attorney's Office. If convicted, he could face years in prison and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. In West Fresno, a new elementary school will bear the name of a human rights activist. As Esther Quintanilla with the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative reports, it's the first school in the nation named after a person from the Sikh faith.
Following the 1984 genocide of Sikhs in India, Jaswant Singh Kalra uncovered the identities of thousands who were killed. He disappeared in the 90s, and it's believed he was a target for his work, and that the Indian government was behind it. Today, thousands of followers of the Sikh faith live in the Central Valley, including a significant portion of students at Central Unified School District. Harinder Kaur teaches at Central East High School. She said naming an elementary school after Jaswant Singh is a historic moment. Now we will set many more milestones. You will show the world what Sikhs are like, what Punjabis are like. Raul Diaz will be the school's principal.
Let this building stand not just as a place of education, but a beacon of equity, inclusion, and courage. Welcome to Jaswant Singh Kalra Elementary.
The school will welcome its first students in August. In Fresno, I'm Esther Quintanilla.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the members of KVPR. Join at $8 or more per month and access ad-free NPR podcasts through NPR Plus. Give now at kvpr.org/donate.
And now to our main story. Summer is officially here, and I know you're probably dreading those triple-digit temperatures that are coming. But how much are you thinking about the snowpack? A recent report from NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, shows nearly all basins across the Western U.S. are in what is called a late-season snow drought, meaning there is less snowpack than normal. While overall this year's snowpack in the Sierra Nevada was pretty average, there was an early melt due to a drier spring. You may be able to do the math yourself. A thinner snowpack means less snow that can melt. Couple that with less water that can go downstream. Some years are better than others, and some are worse than others. When you take these fluctuations over a long period of time, you get a much better picture of what all of this means. So today we're talking with Dan McEvoy. He's a climatologist at the Western Regional Climate Center, one of 6 such centers in the U.S. run by NOAA. He's going to help us better understand what the changes in the snowpack can tell us. We already know that we're living through a period of declining snowpack, and it's an issue that's putting water managers to the task of figuring out how to manage the resource. Dan is speaking with us from Reno, and from his window he could still see some late-season snow patches over the Sierra. He begins this interview by describing snow drought.
This term, snow drought, really started to be used quite a bit more by researchers, and then more by the media, and I've heard it, used in the public as well. Really right after the 2015 snow drought event, which was a really severe event that impacted the entire Western United States. That was the year where there was the lowest snowpack on record in the Sierra Nevada, and also extremely low snowpack in the Cascades in Oregon and Washington. And it was that event that really got me interested in snow drought and others researching the topic. And what stood out about that year was how extremely warm the temperatures were during the winter, and the fact that in places, particularly in Oregon and Washington in the Cascades, these places were in a snow drought, not because there wasn't precipitation falling during the winter. In fact, some of those places had above average precipitation, but because it was too warm to snow, even in the mountains. And so there was more rainfall in the mountains, much more than a typical winter, and that led to the really low snowpack. And that was also the case in the Sierra Nevada.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about the rain in the Sierra affecting the snow that accumulates there, because you mentioned the snow drought in 2015, but I'm thinking of 2023 when it was like an insane snowpack, right? Because we had all of that rain and snow that year.
Right. Yeah. And so we also can get that rain in extremely wet years like 2023, where we did have midwinter rain in the Sierra Nevada. But there were so many storms that year, and a lot of those were colder. And so we did have a deep snowpack. But even in years like 2023, this is kind of a newer challenge for water managers, is kind of understanding how to, or trying to figure out how to deal with the precipitation coming as rain in the mountains in the middle of the winter, and how to handle that runoff as it comes down the mountains, because typically it's just stored in the snowpack and then it kind of slowly melts throughout the spring and summer. So it's still a big challenge, and I don't think it's completely solved or figured out how to handle it, but I think water managers are really trying to figure out how to adapt to this changing climate that would introduce a lot more rain in the middle of the winter.
What kind of changes in the climate do you look at to understand where we're going or what we should be taking a closer look at?
There are these stations throughout the Sierra Nevada and across the whole Western U.S. The primary network is called the SNOTEL network, or the Snow Telemetry network. And many of those locations have data going back 40 to 50 years. And so there's been work looking at the trends, just kind of see what direction the snowpack is going over the long term. And then going back even further, the manual snow courses. And so these are done manually by people who go out once a month, each month throughout the snow season, and manually collect that snow water equivalent data with a device called a snow sampler. Some of these locations have snow data going back to the early 1900s. And so the first thing is to kind of understand is, has there been a trend in changing or declining snowpack over time? And the answer to that is yes, the snowpack across pretty much all of the Western U.S. has been declining since the early 1900s. And then we pay attention to, of course, temperature is a big contributor to this. With climate change over the last several decades, we've just seen continual warming of the climate, which is also impacting the snowpack and rainburst snow and those sorts of things. And then there are tools, models that project the climate out into the future, global climate models that basically run the climate out, 100 years to the end of the century to kind of piece together the story with what we've observed in the past, and then try to figure out if we can use these models to help understand the direction that things might go in the future.
I'm thinking of the difference between 2015 and 2023, sort of that water whiplash, as people put it. Where do we stand now when it comes to recent history of our snowpack here in California and the Western U.S.?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, there's been more rapid shifts in extremes from wet to dry, and that's been documented as seeing that happen over the last several decades, primarily in the 21st century. There was some research a few years ago with a paper, I believe it was termed a low to no snow future, which basically showed these projections of snowpack going out to the end of the century. And we're definitely not at rock bottom right now in terms of, the snowpack can still shrink a lot more. As I've mentioned, we've still had enough snow most years. There are, of course, drought years to sustain our water supply in California, at least the surface water supply. So, with all that said, again, the trend is declining snowpack and more rain in the winter. And so right now we're just kind of paying attention year to year and see how those extremes manifest, because it's really difficult to predict seasonal snowfall a year or a season in advance. And so you really have to see how each winter unfolds throughout the year to kind of make sense of it all in the historical context.
I would imagine a healthy snowpack could be a tool available to sort of fight or prevent wildfires. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. In years, I guess 2023 is a good recent example where it was a very deep snowpack. It's very hard to have big wildfires spread in the mountains when there's still snow on the ground. And so that is a good indicator, when the snow disappears each year, of when you can kind of, at least have the potential for that wildfire season to ramp up. And so that is another metric that is paid attention to particularly for wildfire, is that snow disappearance date. Because once that snow is gone, let's say it melts out earlier than average, that leaves the ground more time for the soils and the vegetation exposed to the hot and dry kind of late spring and summer that the Sierra Nevada experiences, and then more time for the vegetation to dry out and become fuels for wildfire. And so there's definitely a strong connection between how big a snow year is and the potential for wildfires the next summer.
Moving forward, what would a low snow or a snow-free winter scenario mean for California in future years?
Really, the whole Western U.S. water supply system was built on making use of these dams and reservoirs to store water throughout the dry season in the summer as the snowpack slowly melts off the mountains in the spring and summer months. And so really they're going to have to flip this on its head and kind of figure out a way to manage if it were, say, no snow in the winter and just all rain, had a handle dealing with that runoff throughout the season, particularly in relation not just to drought, but also flooding, because part of the use of these reservoirs is to leave room in those reservoirs in the middle of the winter in case there is a big storm event, so it can fill up and not flood downstream. And so it's already becoming a challenge, and I think there's a lot of very proactive water resource managers out there that are trying to stay on top of this.
That was my conversation with Dan McEvoy. He's a regional climatologist based in Reno at the Western Regional Climate Center, which is run by NOAA. And that does it for today. Thank you for listening. If you have a summer story idea for the Central Valley Daily team, just let us know. Email podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Samantha Rangel, Carrie Klein, Crescencia Rodriguez Delgado, and KVPR, with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.